Greetings to one and all. It's great to be back with you with my YouTube channel, Read Between the Lines, curated just for you. I am Surabhi Jamal, and today I'd like to read and discuss a very famous poem, The Bangle Sellers, written by the late Sarojini Naidu, politician cum poetess, often referred to as the Nightingale of India. Sarojini Naidu's poems mostly are always filled of images which depict the rich culture, the rich traditions that are observed in our country. This poem is no exception. Let's read and discover what she has to say in the poem The Bangle Sellers. So let's take a look at some details of Sarojini Naidu's life. She was born in the year 1879 and was a political activist and also a poet. She was the first Indian woman president of the Indian National Congress and took an active part in the freedom struggle. In fact, if you remember, she walked side by side with Mahatma Gandhi during the famous Dandi Salt Satyagraha. She was appointed as the first Indian woman to be state governor. Sarojini Naidu was called the Nightingale of India, perhaps for the musical and lyrical quality of her poems. Some of her notable works include The Golden Threshold, The Bird of Time, The Broken Wing, and The Indian Weavers. Today we study The Bangle Sellers, written by her. The Bangle Sellers is a poem exploring the life of Indian women, Indian culture, and traditions revolving around women. One of the main themes in Sarojini Naidu's poems is the vibrancy of the Indian cultural tradition, and in the poem The Bangle Sellers, she has presented that vibrancy through the colors of bangles, which are an important ornament that girls and women of different ages like to wear across the length and breadth of Indian society. This has allowed the poet to present some well-crafted color imageries throughout the poem. The main idea in the poem is to present the stages of a woman's life and the cultural tradition of the poet's time. The bangles are compared with natural objects to symbolize the feelings and emotions attached with the life of Indian women and the roles played by bangles. Let's read the first stanza, The Bangle Sellers by Sarojini Naidu. Bangle sellers are we who bear our shining loads to the temple fair. Who will buy these delicate, bright, rainbow-tinted circles of light, lustrous tokens of radiant lives for happy daughters and happy wives? The poem begins with the bangle sellers selling their colorful merchandise at the temple fair, calling out to people to buy their bangles. It is important to note here that the speakers of the poem are several, but it appears as if there is a single voice. This is due to the fact that they all have the same purpose. Now, although the poem focuses extensively on the stages in the life of a woman, it portrays the lives of the bangle sellers as well, very briefly though. Not only is the poverty or the hardship of their vocation mentioned in the poem, uh, calling them shining loads, which denotes the heaviness of the bangle seller employs a joyous voice which makes us forget that their livelihoods depend solely on the sale of these bangles. These bangle sellers advertise their bangles as delicate, bright, rainbow tinted colors of light, which are symbolic of the multicolored phases of a woman's life. And here they question who will buy these bangles for their daughters and wives. And then by posing this question, they immediately attract customers to buy bangles by saying they are lustrous tokens of radiant lives, that is, shining gifts worn by Indian girls and women, especially on occasions to express their joy and delight. This is perhaps a magical appeal made to the customers to buy bangles, as if they are worn, they will ensure the well being of a family, as they are associated with happiness and prosperity. Let's look at the literary devices, the figures of speech used out over here. So first, the stanza is full of imagery when the poet mentions the bangles as being rainbow tinted circles of light. The second figure of speech is a rhetorical question. Who will buy these delicate, bright, rainbow tinted circles of light? The poet asks a question for which she does not expect an answer, and that is an example of a rhetorical question. Next, we have a metaphor used in the line, rainbow tinted circles of light. So, the colors of the bangles are likened to the colors of the rainbow, and the light reflected by the bangles gives it the appearance of being made of light. This is an example of a metaphor. Some are meet for a maiden's wrist, silver and blue as the mountain mist. Some are flushed like the buds that dream on the tranquil brow of a woodland stream. Some are aglow with the bloom that cleaves to the limpid glory of newborn leaves. In the second stanza onwards, the bangle sellers now talk of the kinds of bangles that they have and want to sell. Some of these bangles are suited for a maiden's wrist, that is, a young unmarried woman's wrist. The word meet means suited. They are silver and blue in color, like the mountain mist, which symbolizes purity. Next, some of them are flushed, that is, pink and light red in color, like flower buds growing beside a woodland stream. The pink and reddish flushed bangles are compared to the buds that peep, as if dreaming, from the calm and quiet bank, tranquil brow, of a river that flows through the woods, the woodland stream. The blooming flowers represent the blooming of these maidens into women. Still, others are green and glowing like the transparent beauty of newborn leaves. So the three colors of bangles out over here, blue, silver, and green, are generally worn by young maidens. It is interesting to note that the poet here uses the words flushed like the buds that dream. The word buds here is suggestive of chastity or purity. Buds That Dreams again presents before us an image of young girls dreaming of marriage. In this stanza, the poet presents the stage of youth in a woman's life. Let's take a look at some of the figures of speech. Mountain mist is an example of an alliteration. There are several similes in this stanza. Some are meet for a maiden's wrist, silver and blue as the mountain mist. So this is an example of a simile. Similarly, some are flushed like the buds that dream. So as and like are the words used for comparison, an example of a simile. And again, we have imagery when you are comparing uh, the buds to be flushed or the tranquil brow, aglow with the bloom. So you can all see these images in your mind's eye. They are examples of visual imagery used by the poet. Moving on, the third stanza. Some are like fields of sunlit corn, meet for a bride on her bridal morn. Some like the flame of a marriage fire, or rich with the hue of her heart's desire, tinkling, luminous, tender, and clear, like her bridal laughter and bridal tear. In the third stanza, the bangle sellers say that some of their bangles are yellow like fields of sunlit corn. The yellow bangles are compared to the field of sunlit corn as they represent the happiness and joy of a prosperous life ahead. Bangles of this color are perfect for a bride on her bridal morn. Some of the bangles they have are bright red in color. They represent the flame of a newly turned bride's marriage fire. That is the passion of her newly made relationship. These golden bangles represent the flame of the holy fire around which the bride and groom take their marriage vows. This flame-like resemblance of the golden bangles for a bride suggests the idea of the flame of love. The red bangles also stand for her heart's desire. The bangles are tinkling, luminous, tender, and clear. They express both her joy of starting a new life with her husband and also the sorrow of leaving her parents behind. What we find striking is the use of the words bridal laughter and bridal tears. These words convey the whole transition of a woman's life from a maiden to a wife and all the emotions attached in a single line. The stanza marks the transition of life from a maiden to a wife. Let's look at the figures of speech. We have a simile in the very first line. Some are like fields of sunlight corn. Again, some like the flame of her marriage fire, another example of a simile. Then the bangles are said to be tinkling, luminous, tender, and clear, like her bridal laughter and bridal tear, again an example of a simile. Then we have an alliteration in the line, with the hue of her heart's desire. So you have the H sound repeated in the same line in close proximity. Then we have another figure of speech, which is onomatopoeia. So the sound-like effect in the word tinkling is an example of onomatopoeia. Again, the entire stanza, as all the stanzas, are full of imagery where you can see, you have visual imagery when you can see the actions taking place in front of your eyes. So the vision of sunlit corn, the vision of the flame of her marriage fire, the vision of tinkling luminous bangles or bridal laughter, bridal tear, all are examples of visual imagery. Let's read the final, that is the fourth stanza of this poem. Summer purple and gold flecked grey, for she who has journeyed through life midway, whose hands have cherished, whose love has blessed, and cradled fair sons on her faithful breast, and serves her household in fruitful pride, and worships the gods at her husband's side. In the final stanza of the poem, the bangle sellers continue to advertise their bangles. They shout that some of their bangles are purple and gold flecked grey. These they believe are suited for a middle-aged woman who has journeyed through life. They are for her who has raised her children well and has remained faithful to her husband and family. These bangles, they say, are perfect for the woman who has maintained her household with pride and worships the gods at her husband's side. In this stanza, the poet writes down what she perceives are the qualities of a good wife. Such a woman is truly deserving of the purple and gold flecked grey bangles in her eyes. Pay attention to the word sons, which mean offspring. They suggest perhaps the ingrained attitude of having a male child in the society of Sarojini Naidu's times. Thus, the purple and gold flecked grey are the colors that represent maturity in a woman. Sarojini Naidu's idea of the ideal Indian woman is summed up in the final lines of the poem as an Indian woman who is represented as the force that keeps the family together. In the last stanza, the figures of speech used is mainly imagery. The visual imagery that is depicted in the line, some are purple and gold flecked grey. So you can visualize that particular bangle in your mind's eye. Again, the image of the mother holding her child and breastfeeding him is made very clear in the fourth line. And in the last line, the mother or the woman, the wife, worshipping the gods at her husband's side. All these are examples of visual imagery used by the poet. Coming to the structure of the poem is made up of four stanzas of 6 lines each, and the rhyming scheme is AA, BB, CC. Coming to the themes used in the poem by the poet, one is women's roles in a traditional Indian society. So, no doubt the poet celebrates womanhood in the poem. It vividly describes the different stages in the life of a traditional Indian woman through various colors of bangles that she uses to decorate or adorn her wrist. And each stage of an Indian woman, from a dreamy maiden to an excited bride, and finally to a mature lady, is described according to the color of bangles suitable at that stage. So this does throw light on Sarojini Naidu's conception of Indian women. But again, Sarojini Naidu seems to fit women into typical boxes of being a young girl, a bride, and then a mother. So she over here she's commenting on the ideal life of a traditional Indian woman by commenting on their faithful service to their children, husband, and deities. And that is why I speak about the third theme, that being patriarchy. So, patriarchy is not clearly stated in the poem, but it lurks beneath the surface. Why? Because women are described as either happy daughters or wives, and every phase she passes is through the reference point of either her father, her husband, or her son. So she gives them a very limited existence. And when we talk about patriarchy, we are talking about the male member being the dominant person in the household, and women then occupy secondary positions. So this is pretty strange because Sarojini Naidu herself was a role model. She was a freedom fighter. She took an active part in the freedom movement against colonial rule, and she was encouraging women empowerment. And yet in this poem she puts women, and she makes them have very specific roles, that of being a wife who faithfully takes care of the household and is takes pride in sitting beside her husband performing religious duties. So one does not know really whether Sarojini Naidu believes in this ideal of what a woman should be, or whether she is being ironical about the fact of what she saw, what was happening to women in her lifetime. I leave it to you to decide what could be true about this aspect of the poem. Again, finally, while talking about the tone, throughout the poem, you see a very joyful and a lively tone full of, you can feel the energy and the pleasure in which the Bangle Seller is saying all these beautiful things about the women as they pass through the different stages of life. There is, in fact, towards the end of the poem, in the final stanza, you feel as if, the tone is dipped in pride and a sense of achievement on part of the woman for accomplishing so much in her lifetime. So that was Bangle Sellers, rich with imagery showing the transition of a woman from a young maiden to a blushing bride to a mother bearing sons sitting dutifully by the side of her husband. I'm sure the 21st century woman can do much more than that. But, anyways, I do hope you've understood my explanation of this poem. Hope to see you again soon. This is me, Surabhi Jamal, signing off. Goodbye and have a great day ahead.